Picture a man at a desk. He has a cup of tea, a stack of files, a view of a gray London street from the fourth floor of a building on Broadway, SW1. He wears a good suit. He speaks quietly. His colleagues consider him one of the most capable officers in the building. His name is George Blake. He is a senior MI6 officer. And every morning when he sits down at that desk, he is already working for the other side. He has been working for the KGB since 1951. Not under duress, not for money, by choice. By 1953, Blake has access to one of the most ambitious intelligence operations the CIA and MI6 have ever conceived. A joint operation, a physical tunnel dug under the Soviet sector of Berlin. 11 months of tapping the most sensitive Soviet military communications in Europe. The operation is given a code name, Gold. And Blake has already told Moscow everything about it before the first shovel of Berlin soil is turned. What happens next is the story of the most elaborate intelligence operation of the Cold War, run for 11 months, producing thousands of hours of Soviet military communications, celebrated as a triumph, and compromised from the very first day. If you want to hear the full declassified story of Operation Gold, the CIA tunnel that the KGB knew about before it was built, hit that like button and subscribe to History Unclassified. To understand Operation Gold, you need to understand Berlin in 1953. The city is divided, not yet by the wall. That does not come until 1961. In 1953, the division is enforced by checkpoints, patrols, and the constant presence of Soviet military forces in the eastern sector. The Soviets have established their primary military telecommunications infrastructure in East Berlin. High-capacity landlines running beneath the streets carry military telephone calls, teletype communications, and classified signals traffic between Soviet forces in East Germany and Moscow. Those cables run under the Schönefelder Chaussee in the Alt-Glienicke district of East Berlin, roughly 15 meters below the surface. They carry the communications of the Soviet Army, the Soviet Air Force in East Germany, and the KGB's Berlin headquarters. The CIA and MI6 have known about these cables since at least 1952. What they need is a way to access them without the Soviets knowing. The answer is a tunnel. The concept is proposed jointly by the CIA and MI6 in late 1953. The plan: dig a tunnel from the American sector of West Berlin under the sector boundary and tap directly into the Soviet cables on the other side. The intelligence take would be processed in real time at a facility disguised as a U.S. Army radar station above the tunnel's western end. The operation is designated Gold by the CIA and Stopwatch by MI6. The man assigned to run the MI6 side of the planning conference is George Blake. Blake attends every meeting. He reviews every document. He knows the exact location of the planned tap point, the construction timeline, the cover story, the processing facility, and the identities of every officer assigned to the operation. Within days of the planning conference, Blake passes the complete operational details to his KGB handler. The KGB officer who receives the report is a senior official named Kondrashev. He reads the file. He understands immediately what it means. The CIA and MI6 are about to spend an enormous amount of money, time, and operational risk building a tunnel that Moscow already knows about. Kondrashev takes the file to KGB Chairman Ivan Serov. Serov faces a decision that will define Soviet intelligence strategy for the next 3 years. He can alert the East German authorities immediately. Have the tunnel discovered before it is built, expose the operation, and score a propaganda victory. Or he can say nothing. Let the tunnel be built. Let it run, and protect the source who gave them the intelligence. Because if the tunnel is discovered too quickly, or if it is never discovered at all, Western intelligence will know they have a source inside the operation, and that source is George Blake. Serov chooses to say nothing. The tunnel will be built, the tunnel will run, and Moscow will listen to every word the CIA and MI6 think they are intercepting in secret. For the next 2 years, construction begins. The cover operation is established first. In the American sector of Alt-Glinica, the U.S. Army begins construction of what is publicly described as a radar installation. The facility includes a large warehouse structure above ground and a shaft descending into the earth below. From that shaft, the tunnel extends east. It is 450 meters long, 6 feet in diameter. Reinforced with steel lining, equipped with ventilation, lighting, and a rail system for removing excavated soil. The excavated soil, 3,100 tons of it, is concealed inside the warehouse above. Every bag, every cubic meter, removed at night, stored on site. The operation employs over 600 U.S. and British personnel across the construction phase. Engineers, signals, technicians, security officers. None of them know that the KGB already has the blueprint. By May 1955, the tunnel is complete. The tap is established on May 11, 1955. 3 Soviet cables are accessed. The interception equipment is installed. The first recordings begin. And in Moscow, the KGB knows exactly what is happening. They do nothing. The question is how long they can protect Blake before they are forced to act. And the answer is 11 months, 21 days. What those 11 months produce, and what the KGB does with the knowledge that every word is being heard, is the story that has never been fully told. The tunnel is running. From May 11th, 1955, the interception equipment at the western end of the Gold Tunnel records every conversation passing through 3 Soviet landline cables beneath the Schonefelder Chaussee. The volume is staggering. At peak operation, the tunnel produces 1,200 hours of recorded telephone conversations per month. Teletype traffic runs continuously. The processing facility above the tunnel employs shifts of signals intelligence analysts working around the clock. The raw take is flown to London and Washington for analysis. CIA Director Alan Dulles is briefed regularly. MI6 Chief John Sinclair receives parallel reporting. The operation is considered the most productive single intelligence source either agency has ever run. What is it producing? Soviet Army Order of Battle intelligence, unit locations, troop strengths, equipment inventories, rotation schedules for Soviet forces in East Germany, Soviet Air Force communications, flight schedules, base locations, aircraft readiness data, KGB Berlin headquarters traffic, internal administrative communications, personnel postings, operational references, senior Soviet military officers discussing classified matters on lines they believe are secure, logistics data, supply chain information, training exercise schedules. 11 months of this. The CIA later estimates that the tunnel produces material equivalent to reading the internal mail of the Soviet military command in East Germany for an entire year, and in Moscow, Kondrashev and Serov are reading every transcript as fast as the CIA can process it. Because the KGB has a problem. The problem is not the tunnel itself. The problem is what the tunnel reveals about Soviet military dispositions in East Germany, and what the CIA might do with that information. The KGB cannot feed false intelligence into the cables without alerting Soviet military commanders that their own secure lines are being used for deception. That would require briefing too many people about a compromise they have decided to keep secret. So the Soviets do something more subtle. They manage the traffic. Sensitive operational planning discussions are quietly shifted off the tapped cables. Officers who would normally use the landlines for classified matters are subtly redirected to other channels. The cables that Gold is intercepting continue to carry significant traffic, enough to keep the operation looking productive. But the most sensitive material is quietly rerouted. The CIA and MI6 do not notice. How could they? They have no baseline to compare against. They are receiving extraordinary intelligence by any historical standard. The idea that the best material is being withheld does not occur to them. This is the extraordinary sophistication of the Soviet response. They do not shut the tunnel down. They do not feed it disinformation. They simply ensure that the most damaging intelligence never reaches the cables in the first place. Meanwhile, Blake continues his work at MI6 Broadway. He is not running the tunnel day to day. That is handled by a CIA officer named Bill Harvey on the American side and a rotating MI6 team on the British side. Blake has moved on to other assignments, but he remains a trusted senior officer. He continues to pass intelligence to his KGB handler through a system of dead drops and meetings in third countries. He continues to photograph documents. He continues to report on MI6 operations, agent networks, and personnel. By late 1955, Blake has been spying for the KGB for 4 years without detection. The tunnel is his most significant betrayal, but it is not his only one. During his time at MI6, Blake identifies and exposes to the KGB a minimum of 40 Western intelligence agents operating in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. The exact number is disputed. Some estimates run higher. Each name represents a human being who trusts the Western intelligence apparatus with their life. Several of those people are executed. Blake knows this. He understands the consequence of every name he passes. And he continues. The tunnel runs through the winter of 1955 into the spring of 1956. In January 1956, the KGB begins to face pressure it can no longer fully control. The issue is not Blake. The issue is water. The Berlin winter of 1955 to 56 is unusually cold. The ground beneath the Schönefelder Chaussee freezes, and when it freezes, the temperature differential between the unheated Soviet sector soil and the heated interior of the tunnel creates a detectable thermal signature above the tunnel's eastern end. East German utility workers conducting routine inspections in the area notice something unusual. The ground above a section of road near the Soviet cable route shows anomalous conditions that do not match the surrounding terrain. They file a report. The report reaches Soviet military engineering staff in East Berlin. By March 1956, the KGB can no longer protect the tunnel simply by staying silent. The thermal anomaly has been logged in official East German records. Other parties are now aware of an unexplained phenomenon directly above the Soviet cable route. Acting now gives the Soviets a legitimate reason for discovering the tunnel, a routine utility inspection rather than an intelligence tip-off. Waiting longer risks questions about why the anomaly was not investigated sooner. Kondrashev recommends immediate action. On the night of April 21, 1956, a Soviet military engineering team conducts what is described as a routine inspection of the cable route near Alt-Glienicke. They begin to dig. At 12:30 a.m. on April 22nd, the engineering team's shovels break through the ceiling of the tunnel. In the processing facility at the western end, the duty watch officer hears the sound of digging transmitted through the interception equipment. Then voices, Russian voices, close, directly above. The duty officer has seconds to make a decision. He picks up the phone. 12:30 a.m., April 22nd, 1956. The duty watch officer at the western end of the gold tunnel picks up the secure line to the CIA station in West Berlin. The message is 4 words. They are coming through. The CIA station chief is Bill Harvey. He is a former FBI officer, heavy-set, blunt-spoken, known inside the agency as a man who does not panic. Harvey receives the call and does not panic. He issues 2 orders simultaneously. First, all personnel inside the tunnel are to withdraw immediately to the western end and seal the blast door separating the tap chamber from the main tunnel shaft. Second, begin destroying all classified material that cannot be removed. The tunnel has a blast door for exactly this scenario. A heavy steel door installed at the point where the tunnel crosses the sector boundary. If the eastern end is breached, the door can be sealed, buying time for evacuation of personnel and classified equipment from the western side. The personnel inside the tap chamber at the eastern end have approximately 4 minutes. They move. Classified documents are burned. Recording equipment is disabled. Personnel move west through the tunnel at a run, 450 meters in darkness, the sound of Soviet engineers breaking through the ceiling behind them. The blast door is sealed at 12:38 a.m. On the eastern side of the door, Soviet engineers break fully through the tunnel ceiling at 12:41 a.m. They find the tap chamber. The interception equipment is still in place, most of it. Cables running to the Soviet landlines above. Recording devices. Stenciled U.S. Army markings on the equipment racks. They photograph everything. Within hours, Soviet and East German officials are briefed. By dawn on April 22nd, East German state media is preparing a story. By the afternoon of April 22nd, 1956, the existence of the tunnel is public knowledge. The press conference held by Soviet and East German officials is a carefully staged production. Representatives of the international press are taken to the site. They descend into the eastern end of the tunnel. They photograph the tap equipment. They are shown the cables. They are told this is proof of Western aggression and illegal espionage. The photographs go around the world. In Washington and London, the reaction is mixed. There is embarrassment. An operation of this scale and expense has been exposed. The resources committed to gold, estimated at over $6 million, have produced 11 months of intelligence that now needs to be reassessed in light of the exposure. But there is also something else. There is pride. CIA Director Allen Dulles makes the calculation that the exposure of gold, while operationally damaging, is also a demonstration of American technical capability and audacity. The CIA dug a tunnel under a Soviet-controlled city and tapped their most sensitive military communications for nearly a year. That is not nothing. Dulles authorizes a background briefing to selected journalists, acknowledging the operation in favorable terms. The narrative is managed. Gold becomes a story of American ingenuity rather than American failure. The story holds for years. What nobody outside a tiny circle in Moscow and London knows, what will not emerge publicly for decades, is that the tunnel was compromised before the first day of operation. In Washington, the CIA conducts a damage assessment. The assessment asks the fundamental question: could the Soviets have known about gold before it was discovered? The answer the CIA reaches in 1956 is no. The reasoning is straightforward. The planning conference for gold was held under the most stringent security conditions. Access was restricted to a handful of officers on each side. The Soviets' decision to conduct a routine utility inspection that discovered the tunnel is consistent with the thermal anomaly reported by East German workers. The CIA concludes that gold was discovered by accident. They are wrong, but they will not know they are wrong for another 5 years, because George Blake is still sitting at his desk on Broadway, still reviewing files, still attending briefings, still trusted completely by the organization he has been betraying for a decade. The exposure of gold does not touch him. The damage assessment does not point to him. The internal review does not flag his attendance at the planning conference as significant. He is safe for now. The clock that will eventually catch George Blake is not ticking in London. It is ticking in Warsaw. And it is being wound by a man Blake has never met. His name is Michał Goleniewski. Goleniewski is a senior officer in Polish military intelligence, the Urząd Bezpieczeństwa, the UB. He holds a high rank. He has extensive access to Soviet bloc intelligence files, and since 1958, he has been secretly passing intelligence to the CIA. His codename is Sniper. In late 1960, Sniper passes a document to his CIA handler. The document references a KGB source inside British intelligence. The source is described as a senior officer with access to joint CIA and MI6 operations. The source has been active since at least 1951. The document does not name the source, but it provides enough operational detail for MI6 counterintelligence to begin a review. In January 1961, MI6 counterintelligence officer Nicholas Elliott begins the review. He is looking for a senior MI6 officer who was present at joint CIA and MI6 operational planning meetings going back to at least 1951. The list of candidates is not long. George Blake is on it, and Elliott is getting closer. January 1961. MI6 counterintelligence officer Nicholas Elliott has a list. It is not a long list. The sniper intelligence from Golenievsky describes a KGB source inside British intelligence who attended joint CIA MI6 operational planning meetings from at least 1951, who had access to the most sensitive shared operations between the two agencies, who has been active for nearly a decade. The parameters narrow the field considerably. Elliott works through the list methodically. Each name is assessed against the operational details Golenievsky has provided: access levels, meeting attendance records, posting history. By April 1961, the list has one name on it: George Blake. Elliott does not move immediately. The evidence is circumstantial. Golenievsky's document describes a source. It does not identify one. To build a case that will hold legally and institutionally, Elliott needs more. He begins a discreet inquiry. Blake's personnel file is reviewed. His posting history is mapped against the operational compromises that Golenievsky's intelligence implies. The picture that emerges is troubling. Blake was present at the Gold Planning Conference in 1953. He was in post during the period when multiple Western agents in Eastern Europe were compromised and executed. His postings correlate with a pattern of intelligence failures that, viewed in sequence, suggest a single source with broad access. Elliott takes his findings to MI6 Director Dick White in April 1961. White authorizes a confrontation, not an arrest, not yet. A confrontation. An interview under the guise of a routine debrief, designed to give Blake an opportunity to explain the anomalies in his record and to give Elliott an opportunity to watch how he explains them. Blake is recalled from his current posting in Beirut, where he has been serving as an MI6 officer under diplomatic cover. He is told it is a routine consultation. He arrives in London in April 1961. On April 4th, 1961, Elliott sits down with George Blake in a room at MI6 headquarters on Broadway. The interview begins as a routine debrief. Elliott is methodical. He works through Blake's posting history chronologically. He asks about specific operations. He notes the answers carefully. Then Elliott changes direction. He presents Blake with the operational anomalies, the correlations between Blake's access and the pattern of compromised agents, the timeline that places Blake at every significant point of failure going back to 1951. He does not accuse Blake directly. He presents the evidence and waits. Blake is silent for a long moment. Then he says, "I want to tell you everything." What follows is one of the most significant confessions in the history of British intelligence. Blake does not minimize. He does not obfuscate. He confirms his recruitment by the KGB in 1951. He confirms his attendance at the Gold Planning Conference and his immediate report to his KGB handler. He confirms the delivery of the full operational details of the tunnel before construction began. He confirms the exposure of agents. He provides a number, not 40, not 60, 400. Blake tells Elliott that over the course of his career as a KGB source, he has passed the identities of approximately 400 Western intelligence agents to Moscow. Elliott later describes the moment as the most chilling of his professional life. 400 people. Each one trusted the system that Blake served. Each one believed their identity was protected. An unknown number of them, the exact figure has never been established, were executed as a direct result of Blake's betrayal. Blake is arrested on April 4th, 1961. He is charged under the Official Secrets Act with 5 counts of communicating information to an enemy. The trial opens at the Old Bailey on May 3rd, 1961. The proceedings are conducted largely in camera. The evidence against Blake is overwhelming. His own confession is the foundation of the prosecution's case. On May 3rd, 1961, Blake pleads guilty to all 5 counts. The sentencing hearing is brief. Lord Chief Justice Parker delivers the sentence on May 3rd, 1961. 42 years imprisonment, 14 years for each of the 3 counts connected to the most serious disclosures. The sentences run consecutively. not concurrently. It is the longest sentence ever handed down by a British court. Parker's remarks from the bench are precise. The sentence reflects the enormity of the betrayal, not just of the state, but of the individuals whose lives were placed at risk or ended as a direct consequence of Blake's actions. Blake is taken to Wormwood Scrubbs Prison in West London, Category A, maximum security. He begins serving his sentence in the summer of 1961. MI6 and the CIA begin the long, painful process of understanding the full scope of the damage. The Gold Tunnel intelligence take, 11 months of Soviet military communications, is reassessed in its entirety. Every piece of intelligence derived from the operation is reviewed against the possibility that the Soviets managed the cables to limit damage. The assessment confirms the worst suspicion. The most sensitive Soviet military operational planning had been quietly rerouted off the tapped cables from the moment the tunnel became operational. What gold intercepted was real. It was significant. But it was not the most sensitive traffic passing through East Berlin. The Soviets had given the West a year of good intelligence to protect a single source. And that single source was worth more to Moscow than anything the tunnel could have produced. Blake sits in Wormwood Scrubbs. The damage assessment runs. Networks are rebuilt. Procedures are overhauled. And in Cell D Hall, Wormwood Scrubbs, George Blake begins making friends. One of them is an Irish criminal named Sean Bourke. And Bourke has an idea. Wormwood Scrubbs, 1966. George Blake has served 5 years of a 42-year sentence. He is 43 years old. By any reasonable calculation, he will die in prison. Sean Bourke is not a reasonable calculator. Bourke is an Irish petty criminal and self-styled adventurer. He has served time in Wormwood Scrubbs himself. He encounters Blake in the prison's education program. Blake teaches him languages. Bourke decides, with the particular certainty of a man who has nothing to lose, that he will help Blake escape. This is not a sophisticated intelligence operation. It is one man, a rope ladder, a two-way radio built from components ordered through a mail-order catalog, and a second-hand car. Bourke spends months on the outside preparing. He rents a flat close to the prison. He conducts surveillance of the wall. He establishes communication with Blake inside using the homemade radio, small enough to be concealed in a pot of face cream smuggled into the prison. On the night of October 22, 1966, Bourke drives to Wormwood Scrubbs and parks outside the wall. At a prearranged signal, Blake moves to the inner wall of D Hall exercise yard. Bourke throws a rope ladder over the outer wall. Blake climbs the inner wall, crosses the gap, and descends the rope ladder on the outside. The entire escape takes less than 40 seconds. Blake drops to the pavement. He breaks his wrist in the fall. He gets in the car. Bourke drives. The British press reports the escape the following morning. MI5 and Scotland Yard launch an immediate manhunt. Ports and airports are placed on alert. The 42-year sentence has just become the most embarrassing prison escape in recent British history. Blake is not at a port or an airport. He is in a safe house in London, his broken wrist in a makeshift splint, waiting. He waits for weeks. The people helping him now are not Bourke. They are 3 British peace activists, Michael Randall, Pat Pottle, and a third individual who is never publicly named, who have independently decided that Blake's sentence is unjust and that they will help him leave the country. In December 1966, Blake is smuggled out of Britain in the back of a camper van driven by Randall and his family, hidden beneath a purpose-built compartment in the vehicle's floor. The van crosses the channel by ferry. British border officials check the vehicle. They do not find Blake. The van drives east through Europe. In East Berlin, Blake surfaces. He walks into the KGB's East German headquarters and identifies himself. He has been out of contact with Soviet intelligence for 5 years. He has just escaped from a British maximum security prison with the help of a petty criminal and a camper van. The KGB receives him as a hero. Blake is transferred to Moscow. He is given a flat, a pension, and the Order of Lenin, the highest civilian honor in the Soviet Union. He settles in Moscow. He marries a Russian woman. He works as a researcher and occasional consultant for the KGB and its successor, the SVR. He writes a memoir, No Other Choice, published in 1990. The title is not ironic. Blake genuinely believes it. He expresses no remorse for the agents he exposed. He characterizes his decision to work for the KGB as ideological conviction, not treachery. In Britain, the aftermath of Blake's escape is significant. The Mountbatten Report into Prison Security is commissioned directly as a result of the Wormwood Scrubs escape. It leads to a fundamental overhaul of the Category A prisoner management system in British prisons. Michael Randall and Pat Pottle, the peace activists who helped Blake leave Britain, published their own account of the escape in 1989. They name themselves publicly as participants. They are charged with helping a prisoner escape and aiding an enemy. At the Old Bailey in 1991, 30 years after Blake's original trial in the same court, Randall and Pottle represent themselves. They argue that Blake's sentence was disproportionate and that their actions were morally justified. The jury acquits them. The intelligence legacy of Operation Gold and of George Blake is measured in two separate columns that never fully balance. On one side, 11 months of Soviet military communications, hundreds of hours of processed intelligence, order of battle data that shaped Western assessments of Soviet forces in Europe for years, a demonstration of technical capability that influenced CIA and MI6 engineering approaches for a generation. On the other side, a minimum of 400 human sources exposed, an unknown number executed, the Gold Tunnel compromised from day one, 11 months of carefully managed intelligence from which the most sensitive material had been quietly withheld. And a man who walked out of a British maximum security prison in 40 seconds, crossed Europe in a campervan, and lived in Moscow until the age of 97. George Blake died in Moscow on December 26, 2020. He was 97 years old. He had outlived the Soviet Union by nearly 30 years. He had outlived most of the people he betrayed. He had outlived the Cold War, the KGB, the Berlin Wall, and the intelligence apparatus that built the tunnel he sold before the first brick was laid. He never expressed remorse. The full damage assessment of Blake's career remains classified by both MI6 and the CIA. The identities of the agents he exposed have never been fully published. The number of people who died as a direct result of his betrayals is not publicly known. What is known is the architecture of what he did. A man at a desk on Broadway SW1, a cup of tea, a stack of files, a tunnel that Moscow already knew about before the first shovel of Berlin soil was turned. The most elaborate intelligence operation of the Cold War, compromised by the most trusted man in the room. If there are other declassified stories you think we should cover, operations that were buried, decisions that were made in rooms the public was never supposed to know about, drop them in the comments below. We will see you in the next classified file.